to a great first date. I like your dress.
I thought that I'd said all I really had to say about Zac Brown and the Zac Brown Band's new album, The Owl, when I reviewed that album, but then things got kind of weird. Then Zac Brown decided to release a solo pop album, and this album was called The Controversy. And I really wasn't gonna touch it, because honestly, like, it seems to me like Zac Brown isn't in the best place mentally, like maybe he's not coping with his divorce very well, and he's kind of lashing out, and I'm sensitive to people that are kind of feeling ashamed and didn't want to, like, heap more of that on him. I even say that in my original review. But then there was the CBS This Morning piece that Zac Brown did about this album the other day, and I just feel like I gotta respond to it. So let's get caught up really quick. The Zac Brown Band released an album called The Owl a couple weeks ago. This is an album that found themselves straying very far from their kind of rootsy, country, rockish sound, experimenting much more with EDM, working with producers like Pooh Bear and Skrillex and Ryan Tedder, and largely for everyone, it has not been as effective of a Zac Brown Band album as we are used to. It had songs like OMW,
When you see that OMW,
God Given, where he's rapping about Gucci and Veyron whips. To say the least, people have not liked that album, even though it sold really well, but it's difficult to say whether it would have sold as well if it hadn't been bundled to their tour tickets. So basically, when you bundle an album, you say, hey, if you buy a ticket to the tour, then you get a copy of the album. That way, the labels can just sort of inflate the record label number, or the record sale numbers, and it seems like that's maybe what they did with The Owl. So it's tough to say how appealing it's been, but if you look at the reviews on iTunes, they ain't pretty.
all the haters.
So some Zac Brown Band fans defended the album. Some members of the band even got into little squabbles in the comments with people saying, you know, this is still a Zac Brown Band record, but a lot of fans, self-included, felt like, what happened? So after a week, it seemed like maybe the news cycle was going to move on from the Zac Brown Band, but then Zac Brown released a solo record under the Pop label, and it appeared on streaming services that Friday at 12:01 a.m., and it was called The Controversy. So definitely meant to get tongues wagging and figure out, oh snap, what did he say? Zac posted an Instagram and it said, "My goal as an artist is to create the kind of music that I want to listen to. I love all types of music and I've always approached my music the way I've wanted to. I don't want a specific genre label. Instead, I want to find an outlet to create these other types of music that I love. That's the controversy. This is my chance to be an artist and be creative without expectation. The controversy in itself is all the diversity I love that causes controversy with people who expect just one thing. I'm just hoping to bridge the gap between what's expected and being an artist." I immediately kind of resented his explanation of things on Instagram because I don't know that everyone was attacking him for not making a country record at all. What people were mad about with The Owl was that it wasn't good music. It sounded cringy. They know you to be a father of 5 and you're singing about clubbing and Gucci. The beats felt like really kind of cheap teenage Disney Channel beats on that album. They didn't feel cool, and it felt like you were burying the things that make the Zac Brown Band special. I don't feel like there was a ton of criticism that was just saying, this album's not country, therefore it's bad. I think most music listeners, even those of us, like myself, that care a lot about genre and genre distinctions, are pretty open to letting artists do what they want. That's why Sturgill hasn't lost his whole fan base, even if some fans have been like, it's not for me. He's picked up some more in rock, but I think the vast majority have been willing to travel with him. So I immediately was kind of annoyed with that Instagram, but it definitely revealed that Zac Brown feels like he's been under too much pressure to just make one thing. So I actually went into the album feeling a little annoyed, but then also a degree of respect where, hey, at least you're releasing it as a pop record. I think it's cool that you're doing what you want. This might actually turn out better. But it didn't. These are just a bunch of also ran songs. The beats are not memorable. The melodies are not memorable. The songs are not substantive. There's not anything like Leavin' Love Behind on this. There's one particularly egregious track called Swayze.
I can't be your Tom Cruise, bitch. I'm Patrick Swayze.
He's essentially using the movie Ghost that stars Patrick Swayze as this idea that he's gonna leave relationships and I'm about to ghost on you. Every time I get a new bitch, I need a new bitch. I can't be your Tom Cruise, bitch. It just feels so degrading and so shallow, and it's not that it's not country, it's that it's not good. So once it was established that this album was not a joke, that this was a real release, then people started to kind of be like, what? You're doubling down? I understand why artists would feel that criticism towards them is all an attack on them. But sometimes I think people are coming from a place of really sometimes seeing you better than you see yourself. And I guess there's that just kind of rebellious artistic streak that even I have, where you're like, okay, if that's what all of you think of me, that's not what I'm gonna do. And maybe that's how Zac Brown feels, because he's clearly really resentful of the expectation upon him. That's really clear in an interview he did with CBS This Morning, which aired over the past weekend, and which I find pretty silly.
We joined the Zac Brown Band for a very rare look at its acoustic warm-up on the Zac Brown tour bus.
Now, the first half of this interview is interesting. It's about him, about kind of being lonely out on the road, about how it's not a sustainable lifestyle, about him sobering up, about the end of his marriage, and about trying to put those feelings into his music.
I don't want to be around things that aren't real anymore. And I'm trying to engineer my life to things that have soul, and things that I create. Some of them are fun, and then some of the things are like me bleeding my soul and my life and my hardship out in a song.
But the second half of the interview is really where things take a turn. And Zac starts talking about how he's not just a country artist.
When I put out a record, I have to pick a category to put it in.
You do? Do you feel that you do?
You have to. You release a record on iTunes, you have to pick a category.
And he says he doesn't care about the labels, but the passion that he's speaking with, the kind of blush on his face as he says, I'm not just a country artist. I get the sense that he thinks a lot about the labels.
You can't say country, rock, reggae, soul, and whatever. No, you get one bucket to coin yourself in. I am not just a country artist.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I love that.
Yeah.
And is getting some sort of satisfaction out of breaking out of a mold. And that kind of makes sense to me. He's breaking out of a mold he's been in for a long time as just husband, and he's still a father, but he's not in this same role that he's in. And so maybe there's this way in which he wants to play dress up. Maybe I'm over psychoanalyzing it, but he clearly is working through something. At least that's how I view it. The interview is actually kind of short and kind of weird, and you get this like very pat recap from all the commentators that clearly don't really know anything.
Didn't know him, didn't know anything about him, but I'm totally smitten.
Artists should be allowed to go wherever they want to go and stop trying to put them in lanes.
I always like the music. Now I love the beard. A+. Plus some grooming tips.
After I posted my review of The Owl, a lot of people actually reached out to me and said, I think the biggest difference on here is that Wyatt Durrett, his longtime songwriter, doesn't have any cuts on The Owl. And maybe that was more where the substance from the Zac Brown Band's songwriting was coming from than we realized. Songs like Colder Weather and Highway 20 Ride are these very mature and thoughtful songs. He co-wrote them. And maybe it's his absence on this record that is making it all feel so much more shallow, and certainly making something like The Controversy feel more shallow. I think country artists look at pop music as an opportunity to be more shallow, to be liberated from the shackles of country music, as if they're so limiting. We saw this exact thing with the band Perry. The band Perry decided that country music was so limiting, even though, hello, you had like a 5 times platinum song with a song about you dying young. I'm as green as the ring on my little cold finger. You got to sing about cutting like with a chainsaw. Love is shaded, love is tragic. Burying yourself and your lover if one of you were to cheat on each other. Gonna tell the grave digger that he better dig too. To me, those are themes that are so much more interesting to sing about than anything you're allowed to sing about in pop music. But for people that feel maybe repressed, like sexually, or they want to live harder or do drugs or something, pop music represents this mecca for some country artists of this untapped life. And that's, I guess, how I'm thinking. It seems like that's what the band Perry was going through. It seems like that's what Zac Brown is going through. And I hope that he can hear the kind message underneath all the criticism, which is there's a really, really mature, thoughtful version of you that speaks to our hearts that we all love, and we're sad that that's gone. It's not just that we're mad that you've changed. People are very forgiving and very welcoming to change. It's just that I think we saw a more thoughtful version of you, and this shallower version of you isn't as deep or as cool as you maybe think it is.
Every time I get a new bitch, I need a new bitch.
That's how I read it. That's as generous as I can be, but I really hate when artists reframe it as the fans' issue with not being able to accept them. You're a performer. You do have a relationship with your fans. Their response to you matters just as much as your expression matters. And if you want people to like your stuff, well, then part of that is accepting that they might have some feelings about it. So I don't think it's fair to just treat country fans like they're these dumb lemmings. They just, this doesn't sound like all your other things, so I hate it. There is an element of that. People do that, but I don't think it's what happened with the Zac Brown record, and I don't want to get gaslit as us not accepting that he can go wander. So long as your wandering is joined with quality, people are into it. Look at Taylor's career. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Zac Brown and the controversy and that whole scene. I want the best for him. I really do. I have zero malice towards Zac Brown. I watch those interviews and I just see someone hurt. So, that's it.